Minister, you are most welcome. But before we proceed with the business, we have a introduction. My name is Asaida Kumba, MD Nakasaka North Constituency, and Chairperson of this committee.
Veronica Rabu, Member of Parliament for Kaberamari County and a member of this committee.
I'm Katoto Hatib, MD Kateria County,
William Zo, Angola County North. Atik Bernard, David County. Wamakwiri Mudini, Ologoni County.
Guma, Ivanda North Constituency.
We are done.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Princess Tom is my name. I'm Minister in charge of Minister of State for Education in charge of higher education. I'm here to represent the First Lady and the Minister of Education and Sports. Some of the big education, but I think the education is
Thank you, Chair and honorable members. I'm Murindo Ismail, Acting Director of Secondary Education, Local Education and Sports, and Chair of the COVID-19 Task Force of the Ministry.
Honorable members and Chair, I'm Matiama Frederick, Commissioner Education Planning and Policy Analysis in the Ministry of Education and Sports.
Why don't you come to the table? Yes. Honourable Minister, I want once again to welcome you and to thank you for responding to our invitation to come and have a conversation with us on the effects of COVID-19, how it has affected your sector, and we would also like to hear from you the remedies to combat this situation. Of course, we all know that your sector is one of those which are most affected in terms of population. Your students, your learners and students are quite many, and also the workforce who have interacted with private school, with the private school owners. You have also interacted with the private school owners in the sector, and you have their views. Yes, and the universities, representatives of the universities. So we know their views. We now want to hear from the government side their views on the effects of COVID and the policy and other remedies which are proposing to combat the situation. But before you come in, last Sunday I was at my residence and I was bombarded with a group of about 25 teachers from private school and were demanding for payment from Committe. I told them we are not Committe employees, but they said we are subsidized in service. So they were asking if they could be accommodated because they are really, really starving. Thank you. You can now present. I mean, proceed with the presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair, and my colleague, member of Parliament. First of all, I carry with me greetings from the First Lady and the Minister of Education and Sports, who was invited to attend this meeting, and she went ahead and prepared due to important duties elsewhere. The phone has unable to be here, and they asked me to deliver a message, which I'll try to do verbatim. Chair.
Well, Mr. because you had promised us a Zoom meeting and we have talked about only about 4 times waiting for that. But it's okay, we are here.
Chair, I'll try the message when I go back. Chair, first of all, I want to thank you for this invitation. whenever we have an opportunity to interface with you, we go back to our station energized to do better because of the way the council is always give. My presentation is on the impact of COVID-19 in education and the sports sector, responding to the issues that were raised by your committee, and beginning by reminding you that you are all aware the mandate of the Ministry of Education and Sports is to ensure equitable provision of quality education and sports for all Ugandans. The measures taken by the government of Uganda to control the spread of COVID-19 included closure of all education institutions. These have remained closed to date and left over 15 million learners home. Madam Chair, this closure has therefore had an adverse impact on the operation of this critical sector, and I will highlight some of our findings, which are here below. One, our education system has been predominantly formal and institutionalized. The closure of education institutions has therefore meant that the delivery of education services is severely curtailed. Teachers and learners are not in contact to ensure that effective teaching and learning takes place. This is likely to undermine both the learning achievements and learning outcomes. Number two, learning is a highly structured process that relies on sequencing of activities, constantly assessing progress, and designing interventions to ensure that all learners are learning. This process has been significantly disrupted by the closure of education institutions. Three honorable members, Chair, you all know that as a sector we have been working hard to improve our learning outcomes in terms of completion and transition rates. The prolonged closure of schools means that the full factors responsible for school dropouts are likely to win. We are already receiving reports of increased teenage marriages, teenage pregnancies, child labor, alcohol, and drug abuse. But it's always said that an education system is only as good as its teachers. Over time, reports have been indicating high absence rates for teachers. We lose the best teachers, especially for sciences, to what is perceived as better paying professions. The prolonged closure of schools has meant that teachers in private schools are not earning, as indicated, Chair, and we may lose even more quality teachers from our sector. Apart from attrition, we might experience even more teachers' absenteeism and apathy as they seek to supplement their income from other sources. Apart from impact on the learning process, closure of education institutions and sports facilities is also causing deterioration and the loss of education infrastructure and equipment. When school infrastructure and equipment is not in use, it deteriorates quite fast. In this respect, we are losing our core assets, which are already in short supply. Furthermore, while our best business is education and sports, the sector is an important player in the economy in terms of employment and business, and therefore household income. In addition to hundreds of thousands of teachers, the sector also employs large number of support staff in both government and private education institutions. Many of these, especially those in private education institutions, are facing job losses. Similarly, when education institutions are operating, they provide an important market for a wide range of businesses. The closure of education institutions has effectively removed this market, and there must be some effect on the economy as a result. Chair, Uganda Sports has, for even a number of years now, been on an upward trajectory. Many of the successful athletes have had their foundation in education institutions. This is now disrupted, and they are likely to experience setbacks if adequate interventions are not implemented in time to ensure continuity of learning and sports. Madam Chair, before I conclude, it's important to note that our sector is perhaps the most adversely affected by measures put in place to control the spread of COVID-19. Allow me, Madam Chair, to call upon the Director of Basic and Secondary Education to give our responses or give more details as he responds to the other questions raised by the Committe. I submit.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Thank you, Chair, and Honourable Members of Parliament and members of this committee. Members, my submission is not be guided by the concerns raised by this committee. And concern number 2 was, what strategies have you put in place, or are you planning to put in place in the short, medium, and long term for Educ through COVID-19 in your sector? Honourable Chair, the Ministry of Education, of course, in the short term has developed the education and sports sector, COVID-19, preparedness and response plan, contain the effect of the pandemic on the sector. The plan focuses on 2 main objectives. 1, ensuring continuity of learning while learners at home, and preparing for resumption and management of schooling once the COVID-19 post-closure is lifted. Honourable Chair, I want to say many of the interventions are coming back to the guided by that plan I mentioned above. 2, to facilitate continuity of learning for all our learners, especially in primary and secondary schools, the Ministry produced harmonized learning packages of materials. These are being delivered on the radio and television, and are self-study materials distributed to homes. In the first phase, the printed materials were made mainly for those learners who could not access broadcast lessons on the radio and television. Honourable Chair, I want to clarify here. We had the first phase of these materials, which is done. Now we are going in for another phase where we are sending more packages for our learners. 3, these materials were uploaded in the Ministry website for learners with the necessary resources for access. Other than uploading self-study materials on the website, Ministry of Education, of course, is not promoting online or internet-based learning during the COVID-19 lockdown, as many of our schools were trying to come up with. 4, the Ministry is keenly aware that ICT in education in general and online learning in particular are going to be critical in education delivery going forward. However, Uganda does not at the moment have the necessary ICT infrastructure capacity to ensure universal and equitable access through online learning. Nevertheless, the Ministry is developing ICT in education policy to guide the sector towards this objective. Honourable Chair, as regards special needs learners, particularly those with visual impairment, our National Curriculum Development Center is in advanced stages of adapting the self-study materials into the appropriate format. These materials will be distributed to the affected learners once they are ready. The plan to scale up the provision of inclusive printed learning materials to every home with a learner in primary and secondary education is ongoing. We have now received the Ministry of Resources, Honourable Chair, for education institutions in the process of harmonizing them with our guidelines for facing youth and inclusive education institutions. Honorable Chair, we came up with the guidelines in which we are still consulting on, but we couldn't move forward until when we get guided, we get the source from municipal players, which have just come, and we're now trying to see how we harmonize our guidelines vis-a-vis SOPs. However, adherence to these SOPs will require significant increment in education sector funding. We are therefore looking at visible alternative schooling models to what we have been used to. Issue number 3, what are the future expectations in your sector in the event that the COVID-19 containment measures persist? Our response, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, it is important that the education system functions effectively and efficiently even under emergency situations. Therefore, the Ministry will implement strategies for improving the capacity of key players to respond to the emerging needs during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. These strategies will include support for school managers and teachers in terms of capacity building for emergency response. 2, strengthen capacity for monitoring and inspection of schools. 3, improving communication, coordination of various stakeholders, and building capacity education systems at all levels. We are also looking at new modalities of delivering learning to complement the existing model, which is largely institutional and face-to-face. We are exploring utilization of ICT in the instruction delivery process. Last, Honorable Chair, on this issue, we are documenting and reviewing lessons learned and challenges from the home-based learning with a view to coming up with a blended model if measures of COVID-19 and 19 continue to be the new normal. Issue number 4, what are your perspective proposals regarding the practical policy options that the government should undertake to revive your sector? Honorable Chair, our response to this concern is the major lesson we have learned as a sector from the COVID-19 pandemic is that we need to be better prepared for emergencies. That's very critical, especially in terms of coordinating the different stakeholders and players in the sector. We also need to improve our infrastructure capacity, especially as regards ICT in education. From this perspective, the following are critical for reviving and strengthening education and sports sector post-COVID, or even when COVID-19 becomes the new normal. We need to expedite the formulation of a comprehensive national policy on private provision of education for better coordination and regulation. What has come out of the COVID-19 conditions, especially the closure of schools, is that our private schools are not effectively guided, coordinated, regulated, and supported to respond appropriately to emergency situations. As a result, Honorable Chair, even when there are appeal to government for support, they do not have clear records or coordination mechanism to support this appeal. Going forward, we shall need a stronger policy and regulatory framework for private provision of education. Secondly, we also need to expedite the completion of the ICT in education policy. In responding to closure of schools to control the spread of COVID-19, we developed and implemented the continuity of learning framework as discussed above. The most effective way of ensuring continuity of learning while schools are physically inaccessible would have been through online platforms. These allow continued interaction between the teachers and the learners. However, we could not do this effectively as our ICT education capacity is limited. Chair, it is therefore critical that we urgently complete and implement the ICT education policy where we grow our capacity in terms of human resource, skills, and infrastructure. The ICT in education capacity is the most urgently needed at higher education level universities and other tertiary institutions cannot, in this age, rely entirely on face-to-face lecture alone. This level process. In addition, we need to develop a national education curriculum policy that promotes a hybrid or blended delivery model. Such a model would combine school institution-based curriculum delivery with online and home-based study. We shall need to strengthen NCBC's mandate and capacity to produce and deliver education content on multimedia platforms. It may be necessary to establish dedicated educational radio and TV channels to carry education programs in a predictable and sustainable manner. To ensure that there is proper monitoring and supervision of teaching and learning involving all these corporate models, government should utilize online tools. We are planning under this. This is the Directorate of Education Standards, the Inspectorate of the Ministry, to launch a customized e-platform for tracking of learning and learner management system. This e-platform is urgent and critical requirement to help track student achievement and give immediate feedback. Whenever we had an issue where we send materials to our learners, and the question was, can they effectively utilize these materials if there is nobody to guide? Our parents, you know, the education level, the majority of them is not that high to really help our learners. Honorable members, while we promote these complementary models, we must not forget that we still need to invest heavily in establishing and expanding schools across the country to match the rapidly expanding population. More than ever, we need to ensure that all our parishes and sub-counties have at least one government-aided primary and secondary school, respectively. This will help reduce the distances learners have to move to get to school, which sometimes leads to creation of boarding schools and increased education costs. Honorable Chair, I think thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister and the Director for the presentation. Honorable Minister, whenever there is a great club, there is always a silver lining around. What opportunity do you see arising out of this COVID effects of COVID on the education sector? Secondly, we have had some countries opening up and closing almost immediately. South Africa and I think France, they tried, but within a week the spread was unmanageable. They closed that. Going by that, you have plans to reopen schools within this year. Some countries like our neighbor Kenya have declared a regulation. And people would like to know, really to be certain on what is happening this year. Because the data here, no there. And as you have, for you of course, you are the experts, you have identified the effects of the prolonged close of schools on the learners. And the second thing, we are talking about e-learning. E-learning requires quite a number of things. Apart from the national backbone still being not access, and internet not being accessible in many places, it is still expensive. Our internet is still very, very expensive compared to other countries. And also the knowledge. I've seen some children, my grandchildren in Nasarada, their canasaries sending out to try to do things with them online. But the parents have a problem because they have to be there. Otherwise, they will not sit there. And of course, they also have to be alert and knowledgeable. But if you consider our education level of the parents, Do you think that this e-learning, if introduced, will be effective? And what about the practical courses? We are putting emphasis on sciences. on sciences. How are we going to conduct learning of sciences? And our career system. We don't have a well-established career system. Even our homes, they are not known by name, but they say if you go to so and so, you ask here, you ask there, even in Kampala here. Under that tree, when you pass a big fig tree, that is the home. Even in Kampala here, they have just started putting numbers on the clothes and roads. Without proper addresses. I'm not just putting this materials. Maybe MCs, but I still see a problem. And of course, the reason why we're here is to put our heads together and see the best outcome we get. Honourable Minister, boarding schools. I'm sure under the SOPs, there is social distancing. And children in most boarding schools were sleeping on triple deckers. And the distance from one bed to another, from one triple decker to another triple decker, is hardly a foot. It's just enough for someone to get off the bed and go to bed and shower. If you are to subject these to the SOPs, I think the investment in schools is going to be extremely high because the infrastructure has to be developed and they will need funding, and because they are already affected by the closure, many of them will not qualify for funding because banks want to fund those businesses which are vibrant. And of course, they need to borrow money on affordable rates. When the president talked about the UDB giving out soft loans, it did sound like it's education. So there might be a problem. And if you don't have sufficient infrastructure, it means that quite a number of learners are going to stay at home because they will have no facility where to go to access the education. With those two comments, I would like to invite my colleagues and Committe on.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is a very short one. There are two questions. One is really, I want to thank the government, particularly the President, in seeing it very wise most schools. For the reason that some of us are rural representatives, so we see these things, we know how our people work. It is really not possible to practice or to observe those SOPs in our learning places. One, most of our schools are day schools, and the children go home to the community. They come to learn. The teachers stay in training centers, and the mixing of people is just unbearable. Then my chair has already mentioned the conditions in the dormitories, in schools, and children being children. You will want to test one another's mask. How does yours look? Let me see, let me see. And depending on the age, we just cannot control. So I'm one of those who do not want to hear about the opening of any school unless you are there to kill my the other issue is the private schools. I need not overemphasize that gone are the days of Honorable Minister, Honorable Chair and I, where education was education and the private schools were started for the purpose of learning and what have you. These days, that's the other thing the majority of them, because there are people here who want schools, and for good reasons. But there are also many people who have looked at school for a way of making money when it shouldn't be. So really, the private schools, we need to find out, because COVID has affected them more than government schools. And if we are going to reopen, which we will, but not in this, when COVID is still available. If we are going to open, I would want you people to check them and see that they don't come back to maximize the profit at the expense of our children or our learners. Then the second question is more or less on my constituency, but please, Chair, allow me. There is they introduced learning in either, my constituency is inside Teso. We do not speak at Teso. We are Kumam. Now, there was no provision for the Kumam language as a basic whatever. There is provision for Ateso and then Luo. We are neither Luo nor Ateso. And we have a language, a well-developed language. We are in the constitution as one of the tribes of Uganda. And there is no, our children are being forced to learn in Ateso, which they can. And then they are being forced to learn in Luo, which is haphazard. So please, that is to take home and check on that. I have already touched base with somebody and nothing was done because the district came to see you and nothing was done. Maybe at this level I will get messages. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Sir.
Thank you, Mama. I just want to seek clarification from the Honorable Minister. One, this committee would be interested in understanding how you intend to undertake the processes of evaluating the learners while they are actually listening to the radio or even watching TVs or even reading the materials. How do you intend to evaluate them as the education sector to know whether these processes are really having impact and possibly that you're achieving the desired goal? Because I seem to see that the process seems to be not structured, that it may be very hard for the ministry to, even teachers or even the education system, the inspectors or even teachers to do reasonable evaluation of the learners. And then two, what are you planning to do with the very inaccessible areas where they even don't access radio waves? There are those areas, some parts of this country where you cannot access even radio waves, but also two, that there is also no network, but also three, that even some areas, by the way, you find that the teachers are imported from somewhere else. And in the COVID era, most of these people have gone back to their homes. So how are you going to track that, to have the learners across the country well reached out? Then three, Madam Chair, I would like to know from the Honourable Minister whether they had actually completed the UNEB registration processes for all the candidates, primary, secondary, and the vocational. If not, how are you trying to catch up with that? Because I recall that the lockdown was announced, Madam Chair, before these processes were actually completed. And so it might be very hard now for the ministry to track who are the candidates and who are not the candidates, because it's almost running out of time. Last, Madam Chair, we have seen in the transport sector there has been an easing of some of the restrictions. For example, that a taxi which traditionally carries 14 people, they are carrying 7. The bus which carries over 60, they are carrying like 30. Now, why are you not also applying those standards to schools? Because if in a taxi, for example, we can seat 7 people there, don't you think also there are certain education facilities which can observe the standard grading procedures so that people can continue with business, but of course with the clear guidance from the Ministry of Health. And I've been asking this, Madam Chair, that your government says that border borders, for example, border borders should not carry people. They should not only carry merchandise. But you find 2 or 3 policemen are actually seated on one border. And you ask, yes, and you ask yourself,
Those are new.
yes, the security people, they are the army, and you ask yourself, for them, you mean when Corona sees the uniform of the officers, then it cannot really be transmitted. So why this selective approach to issues that the citizens are not seeing a chronological approach to the entire spectrum of managing the COVID? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the Minister and the team from Ministry of Education. Honorable Minister, we are meeting you after we have interacted with some of your stakeholders, particularly those in private sector. That is the owners of private schools and institutions, and the teachers in those institutions. And as members have expressed here with the chair, there are glaring situations where government is deliberately ignoring those issues, which we feel we should put to you, because as the line ministry, you ought to provide a response in those situations. One of the situations is the fact that since the lockdown was pronounced, most of the private schools have been unable to give welfare allowance to their teaching and non-teaching staff, and that has forced many of them to become vulnerable, and their cry is that they might even die before COVID kills them. Now, as people who have been supplementing government efforts in providing education services, what is there in for them as a relief? Of course, we know government gave relief items to people, but this is a particular sector that needs your response. To Madam Chair, Honorable Minister, as representatives of Parliament in the National Task Force, we have been interacting with stakeholders across the country. We met with some district task forces. The materials that you sent out that the learners are supposed to receive for homeschooling, some were inadequate, where it was supposed to be photocopied. Some of the communities have no access to the photocopiers, others do not have electricity, and in some cases you have given inadequate. You find one piece of paper sent that's supposed to serve an entire sub-county. So we got this information from out there. I can mention Kanungu, I can mention Isinjiro, I can mention Arua, where these materials have not been adequately distributed and received. So what is your plan as a ministry to ensure that each and every registered or enrolled pupil or student gets access to these materials? Because these are materials that are procured using taxpayers' money. And these days, even babies who are day old pay taxes. And there, for that matter, we expect you to reach out to all that deserve to receive these materials. Thirdly, Madam Chair, the ministry, I think, is pretending to the country that this is not a dead year. They still have hope. They are giving hope to people that this year will be completed as planned. But it's a fact that from March, we are now in mid-July, meaning actually July is already ended. So if you are looking at any period to be utilized, it's from August, September, October, November, and December. But you're also aware that we are entering a critical political period. Much as we are talking of scientific elections or campaigns, we know what it means to be in active political environment and also having this current situation of corona and education. I don't know why the ministry is not coming out clearly to advise government that this is a dead year, like Kenyans have announced. Let all the stakeholders prepare. Whatever materials you have distributed, let it be just for general knowledge and occupation of the learners, rather than telling them, you're keeping people under anxiety, which is not right. It's better to give people the right information so that their mind is settled and they prepare that, okay, maybe sometime next year we'll have got vaccines so that people can be immunized against this virus and life resumes back to normal. Or we live in the new normal that schools will have to adjust either to conduct lessons under tents or in an open area where forms of delivery of teaching and learning new modes will be adopted, so that observing those SOPs, learning can continue. And this can only be done because even if you declare that let schools resume tomorrow, each and every education institution has to make arrangements to be able to accommodate the SOPs. So you tell me, with this lockdown where some of the schools which have been depending on school fees will have to mobilize the resources, parents have not been working, so it's not really realistic to keep people in this dilemma that is education or schools will resume or academic year will remain as it has been planned, and yet practically looking at all that needs to be put together for us to resume is not yet in a good state. It is really, for me, deceiving ourselves. So, Honorable Minister, can you put the country at rest so that parents prepare and everybody begins organizing for a new academic year rather than keeping them in this situation of dilemma? Thank you.
Okay. Those who did not introduce themselves, please do so as is.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm Anthony Fellow, MP Kyoga. Chair, I would like to thank the Minister and team for being innovative during the season of COVID-19 and making sure that there is continuity in our education system. And I want to welcome the new modalities they are put in place to deliver learning. Chair, my concern is that as we apply these new modalities, I am just wondering whether these new modalities will eventually end into what we can call an assessment of learners at the end of the year, so that the learners are able to be promoted to the next class. And if this will be so, the methodology that Minister of Education intends to apply to conduct this assessment during this season of COVID-19. But also, Chair, as the Ministry prepares for resumption and management of schools once COVID-19 enforced closure is lifted, I want to benefit from the projection of the Ministry as to when they probably think these resumptions can take place. Of course, just to emphasize the point that you raised, Chair, about the need or what they think could be feasible in as far as opening up schools is concerned to learners. And lastly, Chair, I am glad to note that the Ministry is currently documenting and reviewing lessons learned and challenges from the home-based learning. But what I want to know is, through this documentation and reviewing of lessons learned, how has COVID-19 affected retention of learners? You know, this is home-based, but do we really have these learners anymore? If you come to a rural setting like Minamolata, do we have the learners in place? Because, Chair, in certain circles, we are made to understand that many of the learners, especially females, are getting impregnated, and therefore they are dropping out of school, out of learning. Even the boys, some of them have almost given up on learning, and they are trying to establish themselves as family heads. Is there any deliberate effort or strategy that education sector is undertaking, particularly to advocate for retention of learners while they are undertaking this home-based learning? My humble submission, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Another comment from the police. Honourable Minister, on the radio, Honourable also talked about lack of access to radios. But many of our border districts are accessing radios from neighboring countries.
Yes.
One time I was in East India, and we are getting Tanzania.
Rwanda.
You either get Tanzania or Rwanda. No Uganda at all. So I don't know what to do.
Even in Ibuera, Madam Chair, you are getting signals from Congo, and you can't be sure which one is for Uganda and which one is for Congo.
Amudat and Kweni also the same. Amudat Buko, they use Kenya in the radio.
Yes, please.
I'm doing your applications. And you know the structure. The Uganda economy, majority live in rural areas, we don't have access to these things. You have the, as a ministry, just embarked in the new curriculum. The new curriculum is just for only 2 months, 1.5 months, 1 month. And the intention of that new curriculum was to learn ICT. And before we really succeed with the implementation of the new curriculum, now we are frogging and saying now let us go full scale. We have assumed the ICT is already streamlined. There is sufficient, and yet we are aware there is no sufficient infrastructure. And we are just pretentious to see the delivery education when we very well know that infrastructure is not in place. We still, much as we want science, we want innovation, we want technology, and it is desirable that we should be going that way. That might not object. But I think we're going to be cautious. We're going to have just been embarked on, and we are trying to make sure that our learners' culture, as also the supporters, the parents, and also provide what is required. These students of ours don't have laptops, they don't have access to the internet, and yet not even smartphones. Those are very expensive things. Unless you talk about the Kampala community, but if you talk about the community where you come from, and they run a school, majority of those students will not have these levels. They will not have them. And yet they have been well taught by teachers. You know, are we sacrificing the generation? There's a huge risk sacrificing the full generation, especially upcountry, especially upcountry. But if we're going to provide information to all, then we need to rethink some of these approaches. Private schools, I run a private school, that is very interesting. I know they have been overly blamed for not preparing adequately to respond to crises. And we seem to have now lost an opportunity because Uganda has been a hub, an education hub. And many foreign students who are coming in here to study, mainly in private schools, and even at universities across the country. And when we remain conducting business the way we are, it's a day the way we can say now, yes, we are aware COVID is with us. We just put in place transition measures and we try to strengthen this ICT approach. We teach people to learn to live with COVID and open schools so that we don't, because we are like to do more. We like to sacrifice an entire generation. It is really worrying. You can pretend that it will be examination, but examination is for who? Is it for the rich children? Or is it for all environment children? Or at all levels? So, can you testing for COVID? Can schools be assisted? Because when I see where the assistance for COVID is going, I will see it targeting for areas like the education sector. A lot of fundraising has been done. Where is money? I have a school, I don't have a temperature gun supplying to me. Or even these masks
schools. We thought we talk about assisting schools in these circumstances to deliver results. But the way private schools are looked at, they are looked at as purely business. And His Excellency has been on record of saying, private schools should not pay income tax. In such moments, I think this is clearly clear. Some of these policies, proposals should be put on the table and discussed. But you don't see some of these being brought on the table. These schools are providing employment, the teachers are being paid to earn, the employers are providing for the NSSF, and the circumstances under which private schools are operating very difficult. And the other, somebody very, very informed. What is it that are we just going to use all this opportunity? The improvement in the drop in literacy, are we going to see a reverse in the literacy rising? Most probably yes. And are we listening to caution by the United Nations on the issue of handling these people? No, because we are warned by the international community that we will actually lose an intelligence. But we don't say about it.
Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. Honourable Minister, it's now your turn to respond.
Thank you very much, Chair, and dear colleagues, Honourable Member of Parliament, for the issues you have raised. As I said at the beginning, whenever we interface with you, we get more energized, more motivated to even do better. Much of what we are doing these days is trying to think through what it is and to make the best out of education services. And so when we get to such questions, we even people our heads to think and plan better. So I want to thank you for the question. I want to thank you very much. And in our ministry, we believe in sharing the eating. So Chair, you allow me to ask my colleagues. I have the director in charge of education and the local chair of the task force. I have also got the gentleman in charge of planning, the matter of this as well as do the planning. I'll be coming in to answer whatever they don't have to answer to handle.
Thank you, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I don't know whether to take. I may start with the
You can fix them in any order.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Chair, I want to start by ringing with peers about the private schools, and I want to say, Chair, that we have intensively engaged the private schools leadership. They have many organizations. We hold them on board. We have had discussions. In fact, as I talk now, some discussions are also going on. And I want to report here, just last week, the Honourable Minister has met the private universities leadership in State House in Educ. They're trying to try to way forward how they can also be safe. And another meeting here is scheduled for tomorrow. Again, I think the meeting, the Honourable Minister engaged in a bid to see what can be done to serve the distribution, especially the private schools. So some efforts are already in progress, and we hope out of this engagement that the country is not far away.
But private schools in some areas far exceed the number of government schools. For instance, in my constituency, we have 4 sub-counties without government secondary schools, and it's the private schools which are filling. So really when you are discussing with private schools, I think you need to take them as equal partners in the business.
Chair, just for information, I'm sure the ministry knows. Regarding secondary education, there are more students in private schools compared to public schools.
Chair, we know that information. But we're talking about, for example, in second, 1,200 secondary school government against about 4,000. So we know the numbers are high on the other side. And that's why the ministry is taking it upon herself to make sure indeed it is a private school. So we shall, Chair, take your guidance and see how it can be considered. Chair, I thought I would give that information about ICT here. He raised the concern and said, are you not in a generation? And Chair, we are very, very close in our presentation. We are saying, we recognize the fact that as a ministry, we have increased capacity to have ICT rolled out for all our learners. That one we are very mindful and was clearly put here. So what is happening is that we are now trying, because it may not be now, but in the future, we need to go this way. Because other countries have embraced ICT, so we cannot be an island. We need also to follow the trend. So what we are putting here in terms of ICT is a future plan, a long-term plan. What we intend to do, we intend to improve on infrastructure, the network, so that we can have ICT in our schools. As an additional model, of course the face-to-face will remain, but in such kind of circumstances, we need to have an alternative that we can run up to. So at the moment, it's not a military policy to say we will teach, we will use online teaching. And of course it's very clear here, we are not doing that.
Madam Chair.
That's the reason why.
Madam Chair, maybe for purposes of this meeting, I think, Madam Chair, we may much be more comfortable with the team being particular and specific. This thing of long term, maybe medium term, I think this time that one may not work here. It would be fair that you tell us that in the next 3 years, next 2 years, is it next 5 years, so that we are clear. Because this long term, medium term is very relative statement. It depends on which sector, which department you are operating in. So be specific. If it is about ICT in the schools, in institutions of learning, are you talking about 5 years? Are you talking about 3 years? I would be much comfortable there to be able to guide our people.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I will remember my colleagues will come on the special commissioner plans. But I said long term, and long term, it will take us to say 5 years to build the capacity. But for universities, it's different. For universities, they are already embraced the ICT.
Yes, sir.
You know, while I sympathize with the Ministry of Education, because they had this sector. And sometimes what they talk is really the truth. But I get disturbed whether the ministry understands the population in this country. Because even you are proposing today, tomorrow, next year, by this we shall have developed capacity. Do you understand the population of this country? Do you know that the bulk of this population you are talking about are extremely in villages, cannot access anything like radio, internet and all this. So all you are planning, really, it's like you are planning in space. You know? You really, why don't you humble yourself? It is difficult because now you are spending money in the area you should not be spending because it is not reaching down to the population. You talk about planning internet, planning this, personal education, that is a waste of money. Me, I represent rural people. And those rural people completely cannot access, even their parents cannot aid them to understand some of those written things. They cannot. The parents are literate themselves. They cannot, even if you give them a document like this and say, you are your child, you kill your child, they will not. So that is the unfairness. When we are doing something for the nation like ours, we should be fair. I think, Minister, just be honest before this committee, not to waste time in justifying doing things during this period, during this period, like 5 years, No, we understand the situation as it is. We understand your challenges because we know. No, we stay with some of these kids at home. We meet all these teachers. We go to these schools which are now bushy. We meet this rural population. And the challenge, some people have not even had any single program of yours on radio. They have not had. But here you come before a house like that where they're fine. We've been doing this. We represent them, and we know. So I think don't just waste your time telling us that we are doing this. What we are doing is a waste of resources. It is not impacting them. We do understand the challenges of the ministry and do appreciate.
And particularly those materials.
Yes. Otherwise, what you have been doing is a waste of resources. It's not impactful at all. In other words, you are going to create two societies. The societies who have means and the societies who don't have means. I represent those ones who don't have means.
Some people are saying they are just looking for money actually for those materials. Yes.
Chair, please. We have taken note and please allow him to complete with some in case they are in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I want to say, Chair, Chair, there are some other issues again raised on radio coverage. This is an issue which we also agree with. Some areas are not effectively covered. And in a way to address this, Chair, as a ministry, we had to task UBC, our national broadcaster, to do it on behalf of the ministry by identifying those shadow areas and try to cover them with the local FM radio station so that
Madam Chair, you see, this is what I've just said. You are lying before a committee like this. The population I represent, even if they have a radio, socially, their social lifestyle in villages will not have that time to listen to radio. They have to go to the garden, they have to go to work and all these places. And they will not be there. They have to go and cultivate, they have to go with their parents. By the time they come, they have to do homework. But during school time, they don't do that because the parents would expect them to be at school. But while they are at home, they're supposed to be part of that productivity. But even apart from that, so the social lifestyle does not allow them to say, as you program, even if they have the radio. Secondly, the economic lifestyle does not allow them even to afford batteries. Batteries become a luxury. But for you are talking as if you're in mass. Which village of Uganda do you come from? Because if you really come from there, so really it hurts us if you continue presenting what is actually not realistic. We are wasting time. We sympathize with you, I've told you. We know your challenges. But we also get into problem to see that you are focusing on a certain category of people, and there are category of people who don't care. Because socially, they are poor. They cannot even buy batteries. But even their social lifestyle, where a radio is at home, the parents take it for their own program. Somebody has a program on this FM, they will say, no, for us we still want to listen to these talk shows. Now, the children are pushed at the periphery. They don't own radio. So let us be realistic, please.
Because, Madam Chair.
Yeah, Honourable Minister, as I said at the beginning, we want to put our heads together. First of all, to identify these gaps and work out solutions. You have seen for yourselves how passionate the members are. So I think you have to do some because it touches every parent. And what has made it worse is also the unemployment of the so-called elites in the villages. Because the teachers are the elite in the villages. Now many of them are becoming drunkards because they don't have, yeah, that's a fact. That group put some premium son. In fact, there was one who did that he has gone in for brewing. And I told him that he should not go for local brewing, he should go in for brewing. Why? Because it's needed for sanitizer.
By the way, are they being paid, Madam Chair?
It's completely gone.
Are they being paid? They're sellers, private school? No.
No, they're not.
Government.
Yeah, the ones who came to me were from private schools. And of course, the ones from private schools are not being.
But this one,
I don't know where the
you
ones
also
from
tell us
private
if you are paying. Because in the past, you have been reporting payment.
Chair, we appreciate all those concerns. And Chair, as I said at the beginning, we are here to share with you what we've been able to do and what we intend to do, so that you even enrich us. But otherwise, Chair, the facts we have on ground, at first we assumed that everybody in this country had ready. And when we went down, actually, as my colleague there is saying, we discovered that quite a number of our people don't have access to the radio. Even those who have access, as they say, they tune in to other countries' radio. These are the challenges. One, we appreciate what you are saying, Honorable. But we are here to put our heads together so that we find the best way forward for our children. Otherwise, we know now, at the moment, we know who has access to the radio, who doesn't have access to the radio. We know, and we are trying to see how do we address that. But please allow him to complete.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'm just reporting what we are doing as a ministry. But I also appreciate the honorable concern and my interest already shared. We know that areas which are not covered. And I was saying we engaged the UPC to identify those areas. In the first phase, of course, many were left out without accessing this radio restaurant. We agree with that one. But in the next phase, what we are planning is to make sure that at least we cover a bigger part of the areas we are supposed to cover. At least maybe those smaller ones which are not even dealt by FM stations, but maybe which can be reached by the local stations. We are planning to make sure they are covered by those local FM stations, and UPC is working around this. Honorable Chair, because we are cognizant of the fact that some areas are not covered by radio and TV, that's why we went in for the study materials. And the first batch was just 25% of what we are supposed to have printed. The reason being that as a ministry, we didn't have any provision in our budget today to provide for the 100%. So we looked around and we got the 25%. And the 25% was targeting the most vulnerable areas. And this went with guidelines to the local governments to try to identify those areas which are more vulnerable and send those materials. Because we knew if we had provided them equally, then it would benefit those who are even benefiting from the radio and the TVs. That's why whenever Chair, when you look at districts like Karamoja, they got almost around 90%. We used the robust data to find out the poorest kind of local governments. So Karamoja received more than other areas, and members are right to say some areas just received maybe a copy or two. It was just fine because the amount of materials we printed, we are not enough because of the budget we had. Remember, whenever Chair, all other sectors got some kind of grants or some kind of support, but Ministry of Education at that time wasn't one of them. So we had to look around our budget to make sure we at least provide what we could provide.
Madam Chair, something that is strange. Why we are having a lot of contestation on this is the ministry is working on the assumption that actually every pupil has the capacity to interpret, to analyze, and also read. And yet, in the real teaching learning process, Madam Chair, there has to be someone who guides the pupil, who guides the student to analyze, to understand, to appreciate. And that's what we are asking, that even when you distribute these reading materials, how have you instituted a mechanism to ensure that actually the reading materials are not simply dumped in people's homes and they are not of any use? That's what we are asking.
Like the coffee settlements were being done.
They are being dumped.
Madam Chair.
Number two, when the lower primary, most of them actually are supposed to first understand the learning in their mother tongue.
Thematic curriculum.
Yes, the thematic curriculum. And the materials that you have printed are actually in English. So how are we going to reconcile this? That's what we're asking, Madam Chair, that this printing of materials and distribution is not helping the pupils. It's not helping them at all. It's not. It's killing them.
Okay. Honourable Minister, let's use that for continuous interruption. I wanted to get one more member interruption. Honourable Taiwa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Taiwa Thomas of the Lagos Council. Madam Chair, I just came from the village this weekend. And while observing SOPs, I met LC1 chairpersons. All LC1 chairpersons. I can tell you, Honourable Minister, that there is nothing like studying, either at home or back, for village students. Nothing. Whatever you send to the villages is having 0 and 0. The children are in the gardens, and this is the reality which I wanted to get from the readers on ground. The children are in the gardens, the parents are just waiting for school to open. The copies you sent to LC1 chairpersons, when they were used by 1-2 people, they got spoiled. Some were coming and it rained on them, and that was the end of it. But number two, also, in an area like mine, Madam Chair, we don't have any S3 photocopier in the whole district. So people couldn't, even those ones who were taking, saying they were going to photocopy, they were just going to read at their home. They were just going to read at their home. So I really understand what you go through, because Madam Chair, I cannot put the minister at task because we never gave him the money to, for example, print all these things and handle. But we were concerned. I remember when we were handling the wrong Madam Chair for COVID. We were saying, where is money for Minister of Education? But other sectors were more shrewd. Let's be honest with the technical people. Other sectors were more shrewd. They came and pushed for their money and got some money. So let us face the reality. If someone lied to you that what you sent at country is having an impact, and he just want to give it to you, you can come. We go to my villages. All these MPs here have been to an area like mine, deep in Kianga in the Rift Valley. There is nothing like study. So the children are just digging with the parents. So if you're considering that if you have opened, for example, you will teach like for 3 weeks or 1 month and do exams because the students have been reading. It's just getting both.
They will fail.
Zero.
They will fail.
You will only favor students from town areas, but as who are in the rural areas, you will get only 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Number two, Madam Chair, indeed, like you also, I got teachers who are in private schools. There is a scare, Madam Chair, which is going to happen. When I interacted with these teachers, they are saying this COVID has opened their eyes to leave the education sector because they don't see hope of being employed. So they have looked for plan B. Some have found bricklaying brings more revenue, agriculture brings more revenue. So we are going to have a crisis for teachers for private schools. And in the end now, you will find, especially like in the rural areas, where the teacher was earning peanuts. And now I found most of them have gone into bricklaying.
that's what they are doing, and agriculture. So you're going to find private schools that country, like in your area where you have 4 sub-counties without a government school, and you are surviving on private schools. Teachers in private schools are leaving the education sector. So, Honourable Minister, I would think you need to prepare to first of all do research. You know how many private teachers in private schools you have. You engage government, maybe we put a special fund. Because you have done a yoga, you're asking for groups of borders, groups of saroons and what. But these private teachers are nowhere to be captured, they are flight to be looked into. Finally, Madam Chair, yesterday we were moving Katosi, Committe of Natural Resources, and we saw one of the schools here in Soli. These schools are like ghosts. Now, these continued rumors in papers about SOPs, I think the ministry needs to come out firmly for people to know, because most of them are getting scared now. I can tell you, if you go on pages of property brokers, the most selling thing are schools. It is schools under sale. Most of them are scared because of the SOPs which are coming out, being spread in the media and are not from the ministry. There is a time the ministry came out and said, no, you must wait. But don't get tired. When people spread rumors of SOPs which show that indeed a school will not even manage to operate at whatever amount, you need to come out as a ministry. You clarify to the public that these are not your SOPs. These are rumors, these are people, because people are going around drafting whatever they are drafting and scared. So it has sent panic into the private sector, people who are dealing in schools.
And yet, Honorable Tayewa,
and are on sale.
And yet, Honorable Tayewa, the government doesn't have capacity to absorb all the students. They don't have the capacity. So how are you protecting private schools to ensure that actually the sector is not hit as it is right now, or even more hit than tomorrow, or even today?
Yeah. So as I conclude,
now there is
a
business of warrant brewing, because the center producers are buying it like hot cake. Many of the teachers and the students have gone into this business, and once somebody goes into that business, it's very difficult to be selected, especially the scientists. There's a lot of warrant brewing everywhere.
So, Chair, as I conclude, Honourable Minister, to me, I think this is the sector that needs very serious funding. But of all things I'm seeing that is happening in this parliament, I have not seen your sector pushing for that funding. However much people are sensitive about the sector, if you don't push for it, I've seen other sectors the way they are pushing in this parliament. They are pushing so much. So when you see someone coming to lobby, another sector keeping quiet, you feel like they are comfortable in whatever they are doing. So I urge you, you have all the goodwill, you need to push hard, but in whatever you're planning, you need to think about upcoming areas. Because whatever we hear, whatever you do, it is designed on urban centers. When you talk of photocopy and you send one copy to a village, you're pushing the burden to an MP.
That's true.
You're pushing the burden because you gave it chairman LC1, chairman LC1 took it LC2, LC2 took it LC3, LC3 is taking it to an MP. So you're pushing the burden to us. So I would urge you, whatever you plan, you cost it. It comes here in Parliament. Everyone here has a child. We want to ensure we get money for that sector and we give it priority. But it has to be pushed by you.
Okay, Honourable Minister,
I want to thank you very much for the input. And I want you to remember to appreciate that the COVID took us by surprise. we are not prepared, and we didn't have any experience on how to manage COVID. Because it's coming for the first time. This is 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 coming for the first time.